Hello and welcome to CJB Games, Cameron here, and today we're starting sprint number 5 for the game I'm solo creating called Groundskeeping, a first-person multiplayer hotel maintenance horror game. To start things off, I want to get some environment art created for this new level. A rather difficult task to complete will be getting the garage doors to be working in the game. There will be 2 of these doors, so I'll create the middle bit that divides them first. This was a simple mesh to create, so we can move on from Blender and begin to texture it in Substance Painter. The texture was also simple, mainly comprising of a concrete and rubber with a splash of grime to make it look more lived in. One big thing I want to set up now is the ability for the player to change the texture resolution of any asset in the game at runtime. This will hopefully mean that each player can optimise the game more thoroughly so they can get a better experience overall. The way this will work is there will be an option to choose high, medium or low texture resolutions, and these will be available in both the main menu and the pause menu. When the player clicks one of these options, it will send a message to every asset on the level to change the resolution of the texture they're currently displaying. With all the code now complete, we can see if it's working. Looks like it's all doing what it should be doing, so we can move on to the next task for now. We're once again in Blender and getting ready to create the main part of the garage doors. I wanted the mesh to be split into many horizontal pieces. These would alternate between a flat plastic part and a rubbery bendy part. Hopefully this will make for a more interesting look, as well as make the animation a lot easier to achieve. Now that all the horizontal parts are created, we can add the top part that the garage will loop around when opening. These meshes didn't take too long to create as they were rather simple in design, and now we can move on to the actual animation of it. Out of everything in game dev, I'd say that animating things is my weak point. A lot of things end up looking rather clunky and not real basically. So with this project, I plan to take great care when adding any animation that I've created to the game. Luckily for me, I only had to create the animation of the door opening, and then I could simply reverse this animation in Engine to get the door closing. With the animation now complete, we need to create the button the player will click to open and close the doors. I made it rather quickly in Blender with a simple design. I made sure to keep the asset as 3 separate pieces, as I knew the player would have to interact with both buttons. With the model now in Unreal, I added it to the garage door blueprint and attached the hitboxes to each of the buttons so I could test the interaction. Both assets are now in place and we can begin to texture them, starting off with the garage doors. These didn't take long and we can move on to the texture of the buttons as well. I wanted 2 options for the button texture, one for when it's pressed and one for when it's not pressed, and when it's pressed it will basically have an emissive to signify to the player. This didn't take too long and it was just a simple material swap in Unreal. And as we can see here, everything seems to be working well so far. Another piece of feedback I want for the player is pressing sounds when the button is interacted with. I compiled a few options together and told it to play one randomly every time the button is pressed. Now that the garage door is working nicely, we can duplicate everything and create the second garage door. So it seems like the hitboxes I created earlier, whilst working okay, would not work in multiplayer at all, so I created a new system that allowed it to transact from the client to the server. And with that we can finally move on to a more complicated task. When the player looks at something they want to interact with, I want a UI element to come up on the screen so it gives the player clear indication that they can in fact interact with that certain object. For this to work, I set up a line trace that spawned from the camera, and whenever it hit an actor with a certain tag, a particular UI element would come up on the screen. The whole process took a little while to get working, but finally it is in and I can move on to the art of this UI element. For this, I took a picture of a hand pointing and used it as the basis for the design. In the end, I went with a black pencil-like stroke and a glowing outline around it. This mix of light and dark on the UI element should hopefully mean that it works in all lighting conditions. A widget also had to be created in Unreal so the UI could also be displayed. So as we can see here, it all seems to be working and running smoothly, and I'm happy to leave it all there. Thanks for watching guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to keep up to date with the progress of this game, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. You can also get my previous game on Steam now, and it will be linked at the end of this video.